How often do you consciously opt to purchase products manufactured in South Africa? Well, economist Iraj Abedian says buying local can turn the economy around. A study by his team at Pan-African Investments and Research Services backs claims by Proudly South African that local is not only lacquer, but is also a change agent. Iraj Abedian joins us now for more. Good morning, Mr. Abedian, and thank you very much for your time. Firstly, what was the intention behind the research? What was Proudly SA seeking to establish?
I think the purpose of this research that we were commissioned to do by Proudly SA is to look at the opportunities and possibilities in different sectors of the industry for manufacturing products locally, so that the campaign Buy Local becomes real. If Buy Local makes sense and assumes meaning if there are locally manufactured items that the population can buy, and therefore we looked at opportunities in revitalizing our manufacturing sector, specifically in areas of furniture, food more broadly, or agro-processing, automotive industries, and manufacturing as a whole. And the purpose of it was to engage the nation and policymakers about focusing on the important task of making things locally subject to good quality and international standards.
No, it's certainly a very good agenda to push for people to buy local. But what would it take to revitalize this sector? Because we're now in an era where we're constantly being told to minimize our carbon footprint. So it's an era where you're looking to revitalize manufacturing, but we know that insofar as carbon emissions are concerned, there's a lot here that would be emitted.
Yeah, very good point. We discussed that particular point also in the report. With due respect, we mustn't create false dichotomies in terms of saying that if you want to manufacture, if you want to produce more broadly, therefore the environment has to necessarily suffer, or our carbon footprint necessarily has to expand. It's about how do we configure our network industries, more specifically energy, also rail, ports, etc., etc. And if you look at the entire system, not look at one issue alone. If we look at the entire system, our reports suggest that we need to separate the issues of network industries, specifically rail and transportation, which is a major source of unnecessarily raising our carbon footprint. If we look at different means of producing energy for different industries, we cannot talk about industry as if pharmaceutical and automotive industry and light manufacturing are all the same. They are not. Some of them can use different type of energy, and by using alternative energy for the industries that matter, for agro-processing and a lot of other light industry, we reduce our carbon footprint and at the same time expand the locally produced goods and services.
And there were certainly cheaper alternatives now in the age of technology.
Absolutely.
But then if we had to look at the tax contributions, if we had to compare, because it seems that the sector for a great number of years now, its contribution has been dwindling. I still want to get a sense of how can government assist to ensure that we really do meaningfully revitalize the space, because they constantly speak of doing so.
Yeah, I think the emphasis, as you highlighted, is the emphasis has been and remains on speaking, talking, promising, but not focusing on what it takes to revitalize our manufacturing. For example, the one that we all are aware of it, the lack of sufficient, sustainable and reliable energy is a major obstacle. We can't talk about energy. We cannot have lechotlas about them. We need to sit around the room 24 hours later, make decisions, and make sure that 2 years later, we do have sufficient appropriate energy for different type of industries. And that, in the report, we argue and suggest that the current framework that government has, which is to establish a master plan, as they call it, for different sectors and for the industries, is the right move in the right direction. However, it's not sufficient. We need to bring that from the helicopter level to the ground level, bring in the key players in each industry, including labor and technology and government and so on, agree on an action plan, not master plan, action plan. Action that are sequenced, coordinated, and that's got timeline. And then we start revitalizing all the industries. And lucky point, or really exceptionally lucky we are, that we do have in many areas what it takes to produce, what it takes to generate quality products. And we have shown in many industries and in sectors, services included, that South Africa is capable of that globally competitive standard of production, but it requires less talk and more action.
And even action on our part as consumers. You know, I don't know if, I read an article where you carefully explained this, the whole notion that if it's local, it's sometimes slightly a bit pricier. And you go on to say that, of course, it would be pricier, but the more we start to buy, then we're going to see mass production, and then the prices would be reduced. Just elaborate on this.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very central point, because up to now, always price has been the sort of single criterion for whether we can produce something better than India, China, America, or wherever. And we need to get a little bit more sophisticated post-COVID. Disruptions to the economy globally, not to the South African economy, has shown that price is an important one, but not the only variable. If we integrate our local manufacturing into the distribution and into the consumer habits and preferences, two things happen. One is that accessibility and the impact of our purchases begins to demonstrate in our own economy in the form of more jobs, more output, more tax revenue, and better standard of living for thousands of people. Manufacturing, as you mentioned, has been neglected, and hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost. That means hundreds of thousands of families who could have benefited from our consumption preferences now don't have jobs. So we need to look at that and not just the price. Secondly, and very importantly, the more our manufacturers produce, the better they get, and the better they benchmark themselves against best practices. But it's driven by you and I as a consumer. So we don't have to put up with low quality. We don't have to assume that if it's locally produced, it will be necessarily low quality or necessarily more expensive. Our retailers and wholesalers need to come to the party, be around the table for planning, and make sure that the locally manufactured are given the shelf space, if you like, the profile, and the distribution support that they need. Our bankers and financial institutions have to come into the party to make sure that our local manufacturers are given the right favorable terms and not always squeezed because they're small or medium. And in that coordination, we can produce local items, quality, and not necessarily more expensive. And we've got examples to show for it right around the country.
Iraj, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's Pan-African Investment CEO Iraj Abedian. To KZN now, with the Director of Public Prosecutions.